boxing has the deepest history in all organized sports. The early days were chronicled through writing, and we're now able to witness historic fights from previous centuries through videos and more. We have long pondered who would win in a matchup between the greats of the past. In today's episode, we take a look at a matchup between the first recognized world heavyweight champion in boxing, the Boston Strong Boy John L. Sullivan, and former colored heavyweight champion the Black Prince Peter Jackson. John L. Sullivan had a total of 41 official bouts under the Marquess of Queensberry rules, which is what all boxers compete under today. Sullivan had 38 wins, 32 by knockout, with a knockout ratio of 84%. He suffered only one defeat. He had one draw. He stood at 5 feet 10 and a half inches with an aggregate weight of 208 pounds over his career. This included a 74-inch reach. Peter Jackson had a total of 78 official bouts. Jackson amassed 42 victories with 29 coming by way of knockout for a 69% KO ratio. He suffered 5 losses, 3 by knockout. Jackson had a total of 13 draws, which was common during this time, 2 no contests, and 27 no decision bouts. He stood at 6 feet 1 and a half inches with an aggregate weight of 197 pounds over his career. His reach was 77 inches. Sullivan was the first superstar in the sport of boxing, and is credited with taking boxing mainstream. Sullivan's is the last bare-knuckle champion, but he was truly a proponent for gloved fighting, the sport we know now. Sullivan was usually quick out of the gates and was the first to introduce the knockout as a regular occurrence in the sport at a mainstream level. Under the bare knuckles rules, fights could get drawn out and often featured a lot of holding and wrestling, not to mention eye gouging. Sullivan, for his time, represented the shift to knockouts in a manner which raised the sport of boxing to unprecedented heights. Sullivan often swarmed his opponents with a barrage of shots which usually led to early knockouts or stoppages. He wasn't one for movers and what would now be considered more defensive fighters, and truly thrived off of fighters who chose to come forward and fight fire with fire. Sullivan would fight anywhere as he truly came of age in an era where a barge, basement, or ballroom could prove equally satisfying as the standard boxing ring. Born in Christiansted, Danish West Indies before eventually migrating to Australia, Peter Jackson won the World-Colored Heavyweight Championship, as well as the Australian and British heavyweight title, and is arguably Australia's greatest heavyweight. Jackson was a solid, all-around boxer, with an intimidating physique, and truly one of the top competitors of his time. According to historians, Jackson was a graceful and scientific boxer, and usually outskilled his opponents, though he could have a mean streak and finish opponents when they were in trouble. Jackson trained under Larry Foley and sparred with the likes of Bob Fitzsimmons, Frank Sullivan, and Jim Hall early in his career. Jackson quickly rose the ranks to being widely regarded as one of, if not the best boxers in Australia, and quickly started to make waves across the world. Sullivan held the world heavyweight title from 1882 to 1892. Some of his more notable opponents are Charlie Mitchell, who he faced on more than one occasion, though under bare-knuckle and London prizefighting rules. James J. Corbett, to whom he lost his title in 1892. Paddy Ryan, his first signature win, and another fighter he faced on more than one occasion. Patsy Cardiff, for whom he drew with after breaking his left arm. Jake Kilrain, the fighter for which he first won the bare-knuckle championship. And Dominic McCaffrey, a contender from his time. Sullivan is also alleged to have participated in around 400 to 500 unofficial fights and/or exhibitions for which he won. Sullivan embarked on a tour across America and offered as much as $1,000 to anyone who could last 4 3-minute rounds with him in the ring. As he once proclaimed, "I can lick any son of a bitch in the room." Peter Jackson fought all who would fight him, but was heavily avoided during his time. Notable opponents include the likes of the original George Godfrey, a great contender, and former colored heavyweight champion. Contender Patsy Cardiff, who also shared the ring with John L. Sullivan in a draw. Contender, Denver Ed Smith. An epic 61-round contest with the former undisputed world heavyweight champion, gentleman James J. Corbett, a common Sullivan opponent. A loss to another former undisputed champion, the Boilermaker James J. Jeffries. A loss and draw to former Australian heavyweight champion, Bill Farnan early on in Jackson's career, and a fighter that helped to shape what he would become. And multiple wins over former Australian heavyweight champion, Tom Lees. Style and skill. Both men were masters of their own style and each found success, but the edge goes to Jackson. Jackson was truly a finesse boxer and had elite, all-around attributes. Jackson was noted for his pure skill. Sullivan's boxing skill set was geared more towards offensive dominance. Endurance goes to John L. Sullivan, who fought a number of long-winded bare-knuckle fights over the course of his career. Sullivan was primed for deep fights that lasted hours. Chin is even as both men possessed great beards, with Sullivan only being knocked out in the last fight of his career while well past his prime. Jackson was knocked out early in his career, and then well past his prime after a number of years of inactivity. Power goes to Sullivan, who was effective at knocking out his opponents, to include his bare-knuckle work. Sullivan was a fast starter and used peak freshness to maximize his power. Jackson possessed power as well, but was truly more of a boxer at the top level. Speed goes to Jackson, who was elite at setting up punches with the right timing. Jackson could apply his trade with any style, and was athletic for his size. Sullivan struggled at times with boxers who chose to be more elusive with less engagement, typically smaller opponents. Resume goes to Sullivan by a slight margin. Sullivan was able to dominate a number of boxers with varying experience, and bare-knuckle fights included. Sullivan faced the better overall opposition. Jackson was a fight that many wanted Sullivan to take, but it never came about. Jackson did fight some top-level opponents, but wasn't able to secure big fights in his prime, including the Sullivan fight. Both fighters traveled multiple continents to fight. Lastly, intangibles, or even as both fighters brought to the table the star-making qualities that made them known quantities during their time. All things considered, 86 Boxing favors the Boston Strongboy, John L. Sullivan, for the victory over Peter Jackson via decision. Sullivan's ability to weather early storms and fight deep as the rounds went on would be beneficial, but his power more so would certainly serve him well. Jackson may be the more skilled, all-around fighter, but he would have to have been 100% on his game throughout the fight for as long as it lasted to stay upright. Jackson would find success, but Sullivan would be big and powerful enough to wear down Jackson. Sullivan also was a crafty fighter and knew how to throw in legal and illegal tactics to save time and control space. Jackson's best bet would be to stick and move, but this would also prove to prolong the fight to extended periods. Either way, this is a great matchup that could theoretically change on any given day. Let us know your thoughts on the matchup and outcome. Thanks for tuning in.